In June 1812, Napoleon Bonaparte marched into Russia with the largest army Europe had ever seen, over 600,000 men. 6 months later, fewer than 30,000 walked out. Not killed in one battle, not wiped out by a single disaster. They simply disappeared, one frozen step at a time. This is the story of how the most powerful army on earth destroyed itself. By 1812, Napoleon controlled most of continental Europe. Only one major power remained outside his grip: Russia, ruled by Tsar Alexander I. Relations had soured over trade restrictions Napoleon had imposed to strangle Britain economically. Russia quietly stopped enforcing them. For Napoleon, this was an insult he couldn't ignore. He assembled what historians call the Grande Armée, a multinational force of French, Polish, German, Italian, and Austrian troops, over 600,000 strong, along with 150,000 horses and massive supply trains. It was meant to be a quick, decisive campaign. Defeat the Russian army near the border, force a treaty, and march home within weeks. Nothing about what followed went according to plan. On June 24, 1812, the Grande Armée crossed the Niemen River into Russian territory. And almost immediately, something strange happened. The Russians refused to fight. Instead of meeting Napoleon head-on, Russian General Mikhail Kutuzov ordered a retreat, drawing the French deeper and deeper into Russian territory, burning crops, villages, and supplies behind them as they withdrew. It was a scorched earth strategy. There was nothing for Napoleon's army to live off. The summer heat was brutal. Soldiers marched 30 to 40 kilometers a day on dust roads with little food or clean water. Disease, typhus especially, began ripping through the ranks before a single major battle had even occurred. By the time the army reached Smolensk, just 2 months in, Napoleon had already lost over 150,000 men. Not to combat, to exhaustion, disease, and desertion. And the real Russian winter hadn't even started yet. In September, the two armies finally clashed at Borodino, the bloodiest single day of the entire Napoleonic Wars. Over 70,000 men were killed or wounded in roughly 12 hours of fighting. Napoleon won. Technically, the Russians withdrew. But it was a hollow victory. The Russian army survived intact, and Napoleon's force was bled dry. A week later, Napoleon entered Moscow expecting the Tsar to surrender. Instead, he found the city eerily empty. That night, fires broke out across Moscow, set deliberately, historians believe, by Russian forces or sympathizers, to deny Napoleon any shelter or supplies. Roughly 3/4 of the city burned to the ground. Napoleon waited in the ruins for 5 weeks, expecting peace negotiations that never came. Tsar Alexander simply never responded. By the time Napoleon finally gave the order to retreat, it was mid-October. The Russian winter was about to arrive early. What happened next is one of the most catastrophic military collapses in history. Temperatures dropped to -30 degrees Celsius. Soldiers had no winter clothing. Their uniforms were designed for European campaigns, not Russian winters. Horses, unable to grip icy roads or find forage, died by the tens of thousands, leaving artillery and supply wagons abandoned in the snow. Soldiers froze where they stood. Eyewitness accounts describe men falling asleep by campfires and simply never waking up, frozen solid by morning. Frostbite turned fingers, toes, and noses black. Amputations were performed without anesthesia, often resulting in death from shock or infection anyway. Cossack cavalry harassed the retreating column constantly, picking off stragglers. Then came the crossing of the Berezina River. The Russians had destroyed the bridges, and engineers had to build makeshift crossings while under fire in freezing water. Thousands drowned or were crushed in the panic to cross before the bridges collapsed under the weight of the retreating mass. By the time the remnants of the Grande Armée stumbled back across the Niemen River in December, the same river they'd crossed 6 months earlier with 600,000 men, fewer than 30,000 remained in fighting condition. Some estimates suggest as few as 27,000 of the original force survived in any form. The disaster shattered the myth of Napoleon's invincibility. Within 2 years, the combined armies of Russia, Prussia, Austria, and Britain would defeat him decisively, forcing his first abdication and exile to Elba. Historians still debate exactly how many died. Estimates range from 380,000 to over 400,000 dead, with hundreds of thousands more captured or missing. It remains one of the most devastating military campaigns in human history, not lost to a single battle, but to logistics, weather, and the sheer scale of human ambition outrunning what was possible. Napoleon would later be exiled a second time, to St. Helena, where he died in 1821. But many historians point to that freezing retreat from Moscow as the